You know the reason that so many non-believers of all shapes and sizes cannot stand Dr. Frank Turek is because when he makes statements, they're not actual statements that can be refuted. He speaks about facts that are based in reality and based in history. And because they can't refute these facts, they'll try to attack him personally or launch what progressives like to call ad hominem attacks. But the only reason that they do that is because they have no other basis on which to argue with him. And it's always because he says stuff like this.
Ladies and gentlemen, do you realize there were thousands of Christians before a line of the New Testament was ever written? Why? Because they didn't read about it in a book. They witnessed the resurrected Jesus. These people saw Jesus, touched Jesus, or saw people who had seen Jesus, and that's why they became Christians. Then they wrote it down. The New Testament writers did not create the resurrection. The resurrection created the New Testament writers.
And I've heard him use this argument. I've heard him use this argument against college students, against professors, against atheists during his debates, and they never have a good response to it. And there's only one simple reason to it. When you're a worker of iniquity, you're not backed up by the Holy Spirit. But let's talk about the Bible, because it seems to be the number one thing that non-believers of all shapes and sizes, like I said earlier, seem to want to attack. They say that it's been corrupted. They say that it's been mistranslated. They say that it's been misinterpreted. But it's amazing to me because the Bible is the most attacked book throughout the world. People want to always say things like, well, there is no proof that any of it happened, even though there is. They'll read a history book and they will take it as evidence that something actually happened. They can read about the Revolutionary War in the United States of America or the Civil War. They can read about the Roman Empire. They can read about ancient Africa, and they won't question a single bit of it. But the difference between that and the Bible is that the Bible is actually telling you what you should and shouldn't be doing. And living in a world where everyone tells you that sin is a normal part of life and is okay, it's no wonder that they want to attack it. But is the Bible really a fairy tale or a book without evidence, as people like to say? Let's find out.
Have you ever heard someone claim that the Bible's been through so many changes and so many revisions that we really can't know what the original message was? Let's use some coffee beans to illustrate a major problem with that argument. And what we're going to do is look at the manuscript evidence for some ancient writings compared to the manuscript evidence for the New Testament. That is, we're going to be looking at the handwritten copies made before the days of the printing press for each of these works. For example, for Tacitus, he wrote his famous work called the Annals around the year AD 100. And the earliest copy we have for that comes from about 750 years later. So there's a 750-year gap between when it was written and our earliest copy. How many copies do we have? Just 2. So let's put 2 beans in this cup to represent those manuscripts. For Plato's Dialogues, there's a 1200-year gap, and we have just 7 copies. For the Histories by Herodotus, there's a 1300-year gap with just 9 copies. And we have 10 copies of Caesar's Gallic Wars after a 900-year gap. Now, very few people question whether we have the original message of these writings, yet they constantly attack the Bible on this point. And yet the manuscript evidence we have for these is so minimal, and the gap between when they were written and when their earliest copies come from is enormous. So what about the New Testament? Well, it was written in the 1st century AD, and the earliest manuscript evidence we have for it comes within 50 years of that time. Now, how many copies do we have? Well, there are nearly 6,000 Greek New Testament manuscripts, and they average about 450 pages each. Looks like I should have used a bigger cup. But you know what? That's just the Greek manuscripts. When we count the other languages like Latin, Coptic, and Armenian, there's another 20,000 manuscripts. As I mentioned earlier, critics and skeptics rarely question whether we have the original message of these writings, and yet they frequently attack the Bible on this point. You know, it really just shows their bias. But when we look at the evidence before us, we see that their arguments really don't amount to a hill of beans.
And that was an illustration so simple, even an atheist could understand it. So you see, ladies and gentlemen, it isn't because the Bible is without credibility or without historical or archaeological fact. It isn't any of those things. The fact of the matter is that it isn't that it didn't actually happen, it's that people don't want it to have happened. Because they know if it's true, and they know that it is, then they have to give up their sin and they have to be accountable. And God forbid that in today's day and age, somebody actually have to be accountable for their actions. That would be a travesty, wouldn't it? Next time somebody tries to tell you that the Bible is a fairy tale, you point them to this video. As always, guys, be safe, be good, be blessed. I'll see you when I see you. And remember, tomorrow isn't promised to anybody. Have a good one.